Okay, now can you hear me all of you? Students, now can you hear me? Is it
Yes, miss.
audible? Okay. All right. So we were discussing that how are you supposed to find out the errors in trial balance and how do you rectify it. I've given you a page in last class. I shared a small link with you. And if it is open in front of you, please let me know. Let me share the screen with you so that it's visible here as well. Just give me a second. Yes. Is the screen visible?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes,
All right. So these are the different correction of errors, and there are different types of errors that we discussed. There are few errors that do affect the trial balance, while there are some errors that do not affect the trial balance, right? The more important ones are those that do not affect the trial balance, because when you see that debit and credit side are not equal, then you already know that there is something going on and there is some problem with my calculations, right? But when the debit and credit sides are equal, then you cannot be assured that what was the problem mainly, right? So we are going to revise today that what were the errors that do not affect the trial balance, that after these errors, the debit and credit side are equal. Okay, but then you have to figure it out yourself, that how do we know that there is some error that has been made and how do we rectify it. So please note down that these types of errors are called errors that do not affect the trial balance. Number one is called error of principle. The error of principle arises when a transaction is recorded in the wrong class of account without due regards to the fundamental accounting principle. Wrong class of account means that the debit and credit rule is same. For example, the asset is being debited and the expenses are also being debited. So instead of writing down asset, you have written expenses. Or if instead of writing down expenses, you have written asset. Similarly, the rule of crediting for liabilities, for revenues, and for capital is same. That is credit, right? So instead of crediting revenue, you have credited liability. Or instead of crediting a capital, you have credited a revenue. So means the thing that the amount that was supposed to be debited, that is correct, but you have written the wrong class. For example, over here it's written a machine purchased for 10,000 cash has been debited to purchases account, right? So the machine was an asset and it had to be debited. The correct entry was machine debit and cash credit, right? Also, make sure that you are supposed to make three entries every time. There are going to be three entries. One is going to be correct entry that was supposed to be done. Then there is an error entry that you did by mistake, and then there is a rectifying entry. And what you are supposed to do, you are just supposed to make a journal that what is debited, what is credited, that's it. No T account, nothing else, just a journal, small journal, right? If we look here, the correct entry was that machinery is supposed to be debited and cash is supposed to be credited. In the error, you have um, they have written purchases account debited and cash account credited. Cash was supposed to be credited, which is right, but instead of debiting machine, you have debited purchases account, the expense account. So the rectifying entry is that you will not change, you will not change uh, machinery. Sorry, you will not change cash because cash was supposed to be credited and you have credited, right? You're not going to change anything on cash, but you were supposed to debit the machinery. So in the correct entry, rectifying entry, you would debit the machinery. And purchases you have debited that was supposed to be credited. So now you would credit the machinery. Now you would credit the purchases account just to rectify the mistake that you have made. If any of you has any confusion in this error, please let me know. I will repeat it again. Any one of you. This is error of principle. I hope you have opened it in front of you and you're making notes, all of you. But still, if you have any confusion, please ask me. Then if you don't speak up, I'm just going to ask random students then. Aliza Ghaus, do you have any confusion here? Aliza
No,
Ghaus.
ma'am. No, ma'am.
All good? Okay. So the next error is called error of commission, right? What is error of commission? This arises when a transaction is recorded in the wrong personal account. For example, you were supposed to make the payment for John and you have written Jack, or it was Sarah and you have written any other Lara or any other name, right? By mistake. So this is called error of commission. For example, over here it's written 400 paid to P Collins. We paid to P Collins. Why did we pay to P Collins? Because maybe the P Collins was our supplier or something, the creditor. 400 paid to P Collins by check was recorded in the account of J Collins. So it was P Collins, but instead of noting it down, we've written J Collins. So what was the correct entry? Correct entry was that cash was paid, so bank credit and P Collins debit, right? P Collins debit and bank credit. That was the correct entry. By mistake, what did you do? You did bank credit and J Collins debit, right? So in order to rectify it, you're not going to touch the bank because bank is already being credited, which is right. So you will not touch bank. Instead of that, P Collins was supposed to be debited. So you're just going to debit the P Collins, and J Collins was, in order to rectify it, in order to change it, the thing that the account that was being credited, you're just going to change it and you're going to write it down as J Collins. Yes, any one of you has marked this red tick. What's going on? Please ask me if you have any confusion. Don't just take red and yellows. Just don't do this. Please ask me if there is any confusion. Ata, your mic is on. Do you have any confusion? Bete, acha, if okay, I understand. If you have any confusion regarding this, see, this is the bank account. In bank account, P Collins is being credited. That means the bank account is, they have not made the journal, they are making a T account. Don't get confused. I asked you that you have to just make one journal entry, that's it, not the T account. But over here, they have made the T account. For example, P Collins was supposed to be debited, right? And with what name? Bank. And bank was supposed to be credited with what name? P Collins. They have made the T account and not the journal account. This is when they have made the rectifying entry over here. This is the journal. Am I clear now? Over here in error entry and correct entry, these two are the T accounts. Please ask me if you have any confusion. I hope it's clear. These are not the journal entries, beta. That this is the T account. Any confusion?
No, miss.
No,
Understood?
ma'am. Yes.
Okay. So the third is called error of omission. Error of omission, by the name it suggests that you have omitted something, you have not, you have forgotten to write something, right? So this occurs where a transaction has been completely omitted. You've not written journal entry bhi nahi likhi, you've not marked past the journal entry, you've not posted it to the T accounts, and then it's not in the trial balance, and that's why your T accounts are that's why your trial balance is debit credit is same, it's balanced, because you have completely omitted something. So for example, any example, a sale invoice to D relay 575 was completely omitted from the books. So we have made some sales to this person. So the correct entry was that when you make a sales, debit the cash and you credit sales, right? So this was the correct entry, and this is supposed to become the rectifying entry as well. There is no error entry in error of omission because you've not made an error. You have just omitted something. It is an error, but it is got no error entry. आपने गलती से कुछ लिखा ही नहीं, यही तो मिस्टेक थी, that you have not even written anything, right? So the correct entry is going to become the rectifying entry. The entry is going to be cash debit and sales credit, and this is going to be the rectifying entry as well. See, a cash debit or not, if cash, the person was dereliant, it was a credit sales, so the name of the person is going to come instead of cash. Dereliant debit and sales credit. Mohammed Umair, please mute your mic if you don't want to ask anything. Mohammed Umair. Mohammed Umair. Okay, thank
No,
you.
ma'am.
Okay, thank you. All right. So next we have is complete reversal of entries. In this case, the debit account is credited and the credit account is debited with the correct amount. The correction of this error requires the figure to be doubled. For example, it was rent paid 300 by check wrongly recorded as rent received. It is a very important error. The problem is, what is the problem? The problem is that the expense was, we were paying an expense. We were paying a rent, but wrongly we've written it as we have perceived it as rent received instead of rent paid. So just please note down, leave this, don't look at this correct entry or error entry or anything else. Just tell me, if you pay a rent by check, what is your transaction? What is your journal entry? Uh, Ata, when you pay a rent, what is your journal entry? Simple. Ata, can you hear us? Ata, you're not present. Ata, Hassan Wahid.
Yes,
Hassan
ma'am.
Wahid. Yes,
Yes,
beta. When
ma'am.
you pay a rent,
Uh,
when you pay rent, what is your
ma'am, when we pay rent, the entries rent account to cash account, I guess.
when you pay rent to cash? Very right. So, but instead of cash, you're going to write bank because it is done via check, right? So the correct
Yes.
entry is rent to bank. The error entry that you
Okay.
have perceived, and you have perceived it as rent received. So if you have thought that it was not rent paid, it was actually rent received. So what would have been your error entry? If you think it was not rent paid, it was rent received. So you have
Then
debited.
then we have to debit the rent, credit the rent because we have received it.
Yes. So the correct entry is rent to bank. You have made the error entry bank to rent, right? Now you have to change it. But see, the rent was supposed to be debited, but you have credited it. So you have credited it with 300. When you debit the rent, it's going to become 0, and then you have to double it to make sure that now it is rectified. Okay? I'm repeating it again. The correct entry was rent to bank. The error entry is bank to rent. So in order to rectify it, you are going to debit the rent with the double amount, that is now 600 instead of 300, and you are supposed to credit the bank with the double amount. So it's going to be rent debit 600 and bank credit 600. See, this is the correct rectifying journal entry. If you have any confusion, it was very important. Please ask me now. Any problem?
No, ma'am.
No, all good. Okay, then we have is error of original entry. जिसमें there is a mistake in the amount. Error of original entry. This occurs where the wrong amount is posted to both the accounts, although the accounts to which entries were made are correct. It arises when there is an error in amount in the source document before posting the ledger. Example, goods returned from P-Veg 639 was recorded in both accounts as 369. So it is a mistake of the amount. error of original entry. You have instead of writing 500, you have written 400. Instead of writing 400, you have written 4000. Instead of writing 300, you have written 200. So if you have made any mistake in the amounts, this is called error of original entry. So if you look here, and the example is goods returned from P veg. So when the goods are returned, what happens? You have made a certain type of what is this? Is it a purchases returns, or is it going to be sales return? What do you think? Goods returned from P veg 639 was recorded in both accounts. It's a purchases returns, and purchases returns are actually credited. Why are they credited? Because purchases are the expenses, they are debited, and the opposite happens when with the purchases returns. Similarly, the sales are credited because they are revenue, and if you have sales returns, they are debited. So when you have purchases returns, the correct entry was that you would debit the person and you would credit the purchases returns. So P veg was supposed to be debited with 639, and purchases returns was supposed to be credited with 639. Instead, you have written good, you have written right that purchases returns debit, purchases returns credit, and the person P veg debit. But you have written the wrong amount. Instead of writing 639, you have written 369, right? So you have written a lesser amount. You were supposed to write it down as 639, but you've written it as 369. So you've written down a lesser amount. So you're just going to add how much amount needs to be added. For example, you would do 639 minus 369 is 270. 270 आपने और उसमें डालना है. तो अब आप 270 से करेक्ट एंट्री दोबारा रिपीट कर देंगे. Purchases returns debited 270 and P veg credited 270. Any one of you who has any confusion here? जो amount रह जाएगी, the minus the remaining amount would be added to the correct entry. Done? All good till
Yes,
here?
ma'am.
Then we have compensating error. Compensating error. There are two or more errors which cancel themselves out. Just give me a second. Okay, so these are two or more errors which cancel themselves out. Errors on one side of the ledger. Errors on one side of the ledger are compensated by errors of the same amount on the other side. The sales and purchases account are both understated by 1000. For example, uh, you can see your trial balance being debited because purchase account में से भी 1000 आपने नहीं लिखा and sales account में से भी 1000 you have not written, right? So when you have missed 1000 by mistake from purchases, similar mistake is done from the credit side as well. That's why debit and credit side are both equal. That's why you could not see on the first place that you have made a mistake. And then after some while, after a month or so, when you are checking and you're doing it again, then you see that yes, this was a mistake and purchases account was understated. And similarly, coincidentally, sales account was also misunderstated with the same understated with the same amount. So 1000 कम लिखा है purchases में, 1000 कम लिखा है sales में भी. So what is going to be the correct entry? The correct entry is going to be that sales account needs to be credited with 1000. That was missed, that was understated, so you have to add it. Sales account credited 1000 and purchases account debited 1000. So in order to rectify it, this is going to be the rectifying entry as well. Please note down that there is no error entry here. In error of omission and in error of this complete compensating error, there are no error entries. There are just two entries. One is correct entry and the other is called the rectifying entry. Whatever the correct entry was, that is the same rectifying entry also. All right. So these were few errors that that do not affect the trial balance, while there are also some errors that affect the trial balance. There are many errors that actually affect the trial balance because any sort of error apart from the errors above discussed are all the errors that do affect the trial balance. And in order to compensate such errors, we make an account that is called suspense account. Please note down, listen here. When a trial balance fails to agree, the difference between the two sides is recorded in a suspense account. Meantime, just for a while, we record it in a suspense account. This is simply used to balance the trial balance. Errors affecting the trial balance are then corrected through the suspense account. The main errors affecting the trial balance. You also do that when you make a trial balance and then you see that the debit side and credit side are not matching. Then you see what is the difference. For example, the debit side is 1500 and the credit side is 1000. So you know the debit side is yes. Any one of you wants to say something? Varda Zainab, your mic is on. Varda Zainab. Okay. Please mute your mic if you don't want to say something. Okay. So, you also check if your debit side is exceeding your credit side, then you see for how much amount it is exceeding. It is exceeding like for 500. Then you record 500 somewhere. And then you go back and you check your mistakes that you have not made any mistake of 500 in your journals or in your T accounts, and then you rectify it. Similarly, over here in accounting as well, when we see that your debit and credit are not equal, we just write it somewhere in the suspense account, and then suspense account is used for your uh, other things. For you other things, by other things I mean, then you know, rectify, you start looking and you rectify your errors. There are transactions recorded only once in the books. This is an error, that the transaction may be debited but not credited. The transaction may be credited but not debited. For example, it contradicts the dual effect concept. I've told you that every transaction has got two effects. One account is supposed to be debited while the other account is credited. There is no such transaction in accounting in which only one side is debited and the other side is not credited. By mistake, the first mistake is that the transaction recorded only once in the book and not two times. For example, you've just debited and not credited anything, or you have credited anything but not debited anything. So this is the first mistake. Number two, transaction recorded twice on same side. The transaction may be debited and again debited. For example, purchases debited and cash also debited. Yeah, cash debited and sales also debited. So one side is supposed to be debited while the other side is supposed to be credited. That we know. But by mistake, you have debited twice or you have credited twice, right? So this is also a mistake. Number three, understatement or overstatement in one side. Transaction may be well debited but understated on the credit side. For example, you were supposed to write down rent to bank. For you're paying rent, so rent you have paid 300, and when you are writing bank 300, instead of writing bank 300 credit, you are writing bank 200 credit, right? So transaction may be well debited but understated on the credit side. Transaction may be well debited but overstated on the credit side. Transaction may be well credited but understated. So it can be any way around. Your main focus is going to be on the errors that do not affect the trial balance: error of omission, error of commission, error of principal, original entry, compensating, complete reversal, and so on. These are the errors that would come in your paper as well, and I would ask different questions. I may give you numericals based on it. I may give you a small theory based on it. The errors that do affect the trial balance, that these three errors that we just studied, they are that you should know also, but they do not hold of great importance, right? You can miss it. So these were the errors, and I'm repeating again, for every error you need to have three entries. One is going to be the correct entry, one is going to be the error entry, and the last one is going to be the rectifying entry, right? Just two errors do not have the error entry. One is error of omission and one is compensating error. These two errors have two entries. They do not have third entry, which is the error entry. Any one of you has any confusion up till here, because today is our last class before the midterm, you have any confusion in any other topic, please let me know. After this session ends, you would join the same link, and we would have session number 2, in which I'm going to have a small quiz with you. So if any one of you has any confusion here, please ask me now. Yes, any problem, any sort of problem in any other topic also. No. All right. So it's 10:24. We are going to join the second session with the same link at 10:30. I'm just giving you 5 minutes. Just revise your quiz that was given to you last week, which was regarding vertical and horizontal analysis. Just quickly revise it, and please join the link at 10:30. All right. I'm going to mark the attendance also, and then I'm going to grade this quiz also. So, any one of your friends who are not present in this session, please ask them to come in the next session. Thank you.
Ma'am.